to Monday Morning Get Up and Go. I'm your man, Robert Kennedy III, RK3. That's me. I am here because we do this every morning at 10 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, Eastern Standard Time, whatever time it is on the East Coast of the United States. Monday Morning Get Up is the show where we share inspiration, motivation, and a moment of, a shot of coffee. I was going to say caffeine, Jello or something. Let's not go there. Anyway, let's get moving this morning. What are we here to talk about? What are the questions that we're here to talk about this morning? What do you do with your mountain story? When you've climbed a mountain, what do you do with that? When you've overcome a challenge, what do you do with that? I think over the last couple of weeks, what we have been sharing is about using or sharing your story. We've been talking about sharing your story and how that impacts other people. So I want to jump into that. But before we jump in, let me just do me a favor. Go ahead and text me. All right. 410-936-4049. That gets you on our list so that whenever we're going live, whenever we're doing anything fantastic, when we're sharing great content, you can join us. So text me 410-936-4049. Go ahead and do it right now. I got my phone. I'm ready. It's not just a bot. It's not just something that's automated. It's something that I will actually respond to. Okay. So that's really me. 410-936-4049. Do me a favor. I want you to subscribe to the RK3 TV channel because we want to bring you great content and we want to make sure that you're aware and notified when it goes live. So go to rk3tv.live/subscribe. Okay. rk3tv.live/subscribe. So let's jump in. One of the things, as I've been sharing over the last couple of weeks, last week, we actually shared the story of Nick Vujicic, right? And I'm hopefully saying his name correctly. Last week, we shared that story and we talked about how he was born without arms and legs, and he used his bullying history, or he used the experiences that he had gone through in order to become a speaker, in order to be a motivational speaker, a successful one at that. He's been doing that for better part of 2 decades. He's now married. He's got 2 children and he's living a successful life. The challenge for a lot of people is that they don't feel like they have a story like Nick. They don't feel like they have a story like Nick. For those of you that are on Instagram this morning, hey, how you doing? Do you feel like you have a story like Nick? And if you don't have a story like Nick, what do you do with that? And I got to be honest. I've got to be a little bit transparent and vulnerable. I was on a podcast about a week and a half ago, and the podcast host started to ask me some questions about my career, about my trajectory. And as he started to unpack some of my past, I realized that there was some stuff that I had been through, some paths that I had traveled, some experience that I had that I didn't share, that I have not shared enough. Now, I want to share a little bit of my past or my history with you this morning, but I want to share with you, before I share the past or before I share the history, I want to share with you a reason that I have not shared it more. And the reason that I have not shared it more is because of a struggle or a fear of being judged for not being focused. Right? There's this guy that's always up front. He's a pastor's kid. He's had all of this time in front of people and he's not focused. He doesn't have a specific goal, or he's not clear on where he wants to be. Those thoughts have been a part of things that I've struggled with for a very long time. Have I conquered it? I don't want to say I've fully conquered it. I think I've gotten better over time. I've improved as time, but I would not say that I've fully conquered it so that it's just like something that's fully in my past. And maybe some of you are in that same situation as well. You've struggled with the perceptions of others. You've struggled with the words that other people will say, or that you perceive, or that you think they will say. And so because you think people will say certain things, you don't share some of your story? Well, here's mine. Here's mine. I won't go through every single detail, but here's mine. Here's my story. I went to college, and in college, I did a biology degree and a history degree. Now, when I went to college, I did a biology degree because I thought it was the acceptable thing to do. I thought it was acceptable to say that I was going to go to med school. I thought it was acceptable to say that I was going to be a doctor. But after my first semester, or during my first semester in college, I pretty quickly figured out that that's not what I wanted to do, but I didn't know what I wanted to do next. I didn't know what I wanted to do next. I knew that I loved music. And if I'd have thought about it, or if I'd had the courage, I would have stepped into the space of music production. Because see, when I decided to go to college and I was playing and those types of things, the path that my parents and other people thought was a good path for me to explore would be to learn the organ and learn certain instruments, or learn how to play a certain way so that I could become a salaried musician at churches. And that's not what I wanted to do, but I didn't know, or I didn't have the courage at the time to say, I don't want to do that. Or that's not interesting for me, or that's not, I don't feel led or passionate about that. I don't feel like it's something that I would enjoy. I didn't have the courage to say that. And so I did my first couple of years of college, and the sciences were okay, but they weren't fantastic. They weren't fantastic. And my grade point average began to go down because I wasn't clear on what I wanted to do, but I also didn't have the courage to say at the time, I don't necessarily like this, or I don't want to do this. And so maybe about my junior year of college, my mom suggested to me picking up an additional degree, a history degree, because she knew that I liked to write. She knew that I wrote poetry. She knew that I liked to sit down at the piano and create different things. And so she thought maybe a history degree to kind of explore some of that a little bit, and maybe law school might be an option. And so I started to do that. I picked up the history degree and I did that, and my grades began to improve, especially in the history area. But I still wasn't sure if that was what I wanted to move towards. And so my senior year of college, I started to work in the mental health field. Started to work in the mental health space. Now, as I began to do that, it was not a challenging field, or it wasn't a challenging job. It was pretty much like an overnight. It was an overseer, and they called us instructors, or they called us residential counselors, but we weren't really counseling anybody. We were just kind of watching people. But I was in the mental health field. And yeah, I was learning some things, because I was really learning about human relationship. I was learning how to interact with people who had different abilities and disabilities than myself. So there was learning that was taking place in that space, unbeknownst to me. So I was in the mental health field for 3 years after college. And I moved up to the place where I became a director in the mental health field. While I was in the mental health field, and I'm going to shortcut some of this story for the space of time. While I was in the mental health field, I started to dabble in radio and was actually a news anchor intern for an AM radio station in the state of Massachusetts. And so I did that for about a year. And I was actually offered the opportunity to go full time to be the news anchor for the station. But again, I was nervous. I was scared. I didn't have the courage at the time, because the pay was lower than I wanted, or than I expected. I didn't have the courage to say, yes, I'll do that. I'll take that on, and I'll do some other things to supplement the pay, because I just kind of had a lot of different things that I was trying to figure out at the time. So I turned that down, and then ultimately I was given that decision that some of us get when we're in a space that is not a fit for us. I was given the decision to either resign from my position or be in a probationary place for 3 to 6 months. And rather than go through that probation, which I already knew was kind of putting like that scarlet letter S on my chest, I decided that I was going to resign. And I resigned, and I didn't know what I was going to do next. I started to apply for some other positions in the field. And my parents said, while you're doing this, why don't you consider substituting? And so I started to substitute, and pretty quickly after I began to substitute, I got a long-term position as a substitute, a long-term sub. And I was teaching 7th grade English. And I started to do that. And as I began to do that, I found there was a little bit of enjoyment with it. I hated 7th grade, but there was a little bit of enjoyment with it. And I began to do that. And maybe about 6 months later, I was offered the opportunity to begin teaching full-time pending my licensure, right? Meaning what that meant was I would get the opportunity to teach. I could teach because I had the subject matter expertise. I had a biology degree and a history degree. I could teach science, but I would then I passed the test, and I would need to go do certain courses to work towards my licensure. And I began to do that. And I stayed in the educational space for 8 years in the middle school and high school classroom. I stayed there. And so after 8 years, I moved into the college, the online faculty. I was an online faculty in the biology department for an online university for a couple of years. In the middle of all of that, in the middle of that teaching, I took some time and I became a real estate agent. I did real estate for about 4 or 5 years. Started to go to school and became a real estate agent. While doing that, I had started an online business where I was doing promotions and interviewing for gospel music artists. And I started an online radio station. And then I started a web design company. All of this while teaching, while doing all of these other things. So I had all of these really neat experiences, and I wasn't thinking about them as, oh, that's the career that I want, or that's where I want to go, or that's what it was. Just, I had an interest. Something was placed in my heart, and I said, let me try it. Hey, how you doing, Leno? Hey, how you doing, Princess Morley? Morla C. All right. And so as I began to try these different things, all of these different experiences ultimately began to kind of come together. And, then I started a business in the e-learning space. And then I started my speaking business in about 2015 or 16. And so all of these things were things that I did, experiences that I had. All of these things were mountains that I climbed, or situations that I was able to navigate. And as I shared that on the podcast about a week and a half ago, it finally began to occur to me, well, 2 things. Number one, that I'd reached a space of success in spite of not feeling like I knew what I was doing all of those years. That's number one. The second thing that I began to realize was that at the space where I am, because I continued to press, because I continued to explore, because I continued to do certain things, here was an interviewer, or here were some people asking me questions and listening with curiosity, because they themselves were at a space where they were figuring some things out as well. And so I know I usually start with the quote of the day, but today's quote, here is what the quote is, and I'm bringing it in at the end here. Tell the story of the mountain you climbed, because your words could become a page in someone else's survival guide. Morgan Harper Nichols. Tell the story of the mountain you climbed. Your words could become a page in someone else's survival guide. What it made me realize was that I was not telling my own story enough. Yeah, I've told you about how to do certain things. Yes, I share with people how to become more confident on video. Yes, I share with people how to utilize storytelling in their presentations and in their live streams and in their talks, so that they can become more connected and more effective. Yes, I share all of those things. But how did I get here? How did those things become an interest for me? How did I reach the place where I understood and knew that this is the thing I love and this is one of my major calling in life, right? How did I get there? What were the mountains? I realized that I had not been sharing my mountains enough. So that's my story. That's the core of my story. And I hope that as I share that little bit this morning, that somebody was able to take that snapshot of me and recognize that even if you're in a space where you're not 100% certain, even if you're in a space where you're trying to figure some things out, there's hope. There's success ahead. There's a way out. There's a way forward because somebody else has done it. Somebody else like me has walked that path. So here's my commitment. Here is my promise. I'm going to tell my story even more. I'm going to share the stories of my mountains. And guess what? Here's how life works, right? Life is not just kind of like you climb this mountain and then you reach the top and you're like, yay, and then you start going down. If you're focused on learning, if you're focused on becoming better, if you're focused on developing, if you're focused on always being in a place where you can be of service to someone else, you are always going to be climbing a mountain. And guess what? As you climb the mountain, there are going to be some difficult places on that mountain journey. And as you climb past those difficult places in the mountain journey and you turn around and you look back, there's going to be somebody else down further behind you on that mountain. And if you can reach your hand back and grab their hand and begin to help them up the mountain, that is what your story does. Your story is you reaching back and sharing with somebody else how you have navigated your mountain and how they can navigate their mountain too. I hope that was helpful to you this morning. Listen, I look forward to seeing you on the next Monday morning, Get Up and Go. We do this every Monday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, Eastern Daylight Time. Don't forget to share your story, y'all. Tell the story of the mountain you climb because your words could become a page in somebody else's survival guide. Listen, my name is Robert Kennedy III, RK3. I look forward to seeing you on the next Monday morning, Get Up and Go. Peace.